Hi. Happy Halloween. With the spooky season nearly being over, I thought now was the best time to highlight one of my favorite manga creators, the king of horror manga, Junji Ito. Junji Ito is a Japanese mangaka who specializes in the horror genre. It's a name that you may not be familiar with, but you're probably familiar with a lot of his works. Junji Ito is the mangaka that every single company is pushing with awesome hardcover releases of the majority of his works now out for you to purchase. And he has a lot of works, which is why I thought today I'd highlight my beginner's guide to Junji Ito. I'm going to go over some of his main stories, some of my favorite stories, and what format I recommend you read them in. Any of the books that I talk about today, you can actually purchase using my links in the description to one of our affiliate sponsors, so make sure you do that to support the channel. Now, dialing it back a little bit, Junji Ito found his roots in watching the classic occult films like Frankenstein and Dracula. Alongside this, you see a lot of inspiration of cosmic horror in his stories. But his manga and art is also very reminiscent of artists like Kazuo Umezu, who is another awesome horror mangaka. Knowing Junji Ito's inspiration lends a lot of knowledge into the themes and story tropes that his stories take. A lot of Junji Ito's stories follow curses, fears, phobias, and humanity's descent into madness when they're offered up something that is truly terrifying. A lot of his stories focus on specific phobias, for example, tyrophobia, the fear of holes in the body. Or Gyo is a story that follows the fear of the smell of fish, which is a little bizarre. One thing that all of his stories incorporate is an element of body horror. You're going to see dismembered limbs, strange malformed faces, and body parts. Junji Ito's main horror tropes come from a fear of the unknown, but he's also not afraid to show us things that make us inherently uncomfortable. Things that are almost right, but not quite. Large, elongated faces, or fingers, or rows of sharp teeth. Body horror is a staple of 90% of Junji Ito's stories, and the way he incorporates them alongside the ideas of phobias is perfect. But there's also a lot of the idea of cosmic horror in Junji Ito. Most of his stories aren't even explained as to what's going on. They're just left to the unknown because maybe the human brain cannot comprehend what's going on. And these unsolved mysteries lend so much more fear to the stories in general because you don't get an explanation or a resolution. And sometimes the monster that you're facing is just free to roam the world. And Junji Ito's stories focus on two main formats. The first one being his long form stories and the second one being his shorter stories. Now, the long form stories are released in kind of one and done editions, whereas the short stories are released in compilations. We're going to start with Junji Ito's long form stories. Now, the four main ones here are Uzumaki, Gyo, Tomie, and Remina. Uzumaki is a story that follows a town that's been cursed by the spiral. Now, spirals appear all throughout normal day-to-day life, but in this town, they take on a dark turn and they begin to curse the town, to curse the people, to brainwash them, and to take over the town as a whole. And the story follows a group of people who are trying to break this curse and free themselves from the spiral. Tomie is a story that follows a woman who is a succubus. She uses her power to manipulate men into falling in love with her. And when she's done with them, these men brutally murder her for her to just revive and then go and find her next victim. And it follows Tomie as our main character slash antagonist. Gyo is a story that's located along the coastal part of Japan, where for some reason there is a curse that's befallen the ocean, and all of the fish and other sea creatures like sharks have grown legs and invaded the land. Following this invasion is the stench of rotten fish. And the story itself follows our two main characters as they're dealing with the plague, the infestation of the fish from the ocean. And finally, Hellstar Remina follows the story of a planet that has appeared in the night sky through a wormhole wormhole and is slowly making its way closer and closer towards Earth. The scientist that discovered this planet has named it after his daughter Remina, and as Earth becomes more aware of their impending doom, they start to pin the blame of their oncoming annihilation onto this man's daughter. This manga follows a little bit more of an occult theme, but at the same time it lends a little bit to the sci-fi element of space crashing into Earth. So those are 4 really simple plot synopsis for Junji Ito's main long form stories. But he also has, I want to say, hundreds of short stories. And there's a load of short story compilations that you can purchase to read these stories, including Shiver, Smashed, Lovesickness, Fragments of Horror, and Venus in the Blind Spot. Now obviously I can't talk about every single short story in this list, so I'm going to give a very quick plot synopsis for some of my favorites. The Long Dream, which is a short story held in the Shiver compilation, follows a man who lives out entire lifetimes when he falls asleep and dreams. But these lifetimes take a toll on his body. So each time he falls asleep, his body is malformed, becoming almost alien-like in nature. And the story follows his body's slow descent into something unrecognizable. Another story in the Shiver compilation is Shiver itself. Now this follows a curse, much akin to a lot of Junji Ito stories, that befalls certain people who hold an amulet. And when they have this amulet, over time they develop holes across their entire body. Now alongside these holes comes the cold, the deadly freezing cold, which is why the story is called Shiver. In the compilation Smashed, there is an awesome story called Secret of the Haunted Mansion. A haunted house attraction pops up in this local town in Japan. It wasn't there before, and no one is really sure how it got there, but every attendee that goes explains how they were absolutely terrified of what was inside. Now 2 main characters go and investigate the haunted house to find that there is a family that's been trapped there, and they're malformed into horrific beings, whilst the owner of the house moves it from town to town. Next up, we've got my favourite named Junji Ito story, and that is The Licking Woman. Dun, dun, dun. Now, this one, I don't really know how to explain, but basically, there's a crazy woman who goes around town licking people, and it turns out that these licks are leading to people's deaths. Now, the widow of one of her victims actually hunts her down, and that's where a strange mystery seems to unfold. Probably one of my favourite Junji Ito short stories is The Enigma of Amigara Fault. Following an earthquake in Japan, a cliff face is found with perfectly shaped human holes inside it. And people from across Japan see these holes as they're broadcasted on news and TV and start to realize they look strangely familiar because they're shaped exactly like them. And as people are drawn to the cliff, we start to find out what happens when you enter the holes and where exactly they came from. And the last one I want to talk about is Frankenstein, another awesome Junji Ito story that is a retelling of the classic Frankenstein story. It follows a scientist who develops a zombie-like creature named Frankenstein's monster. Now, if reading manga isn't your cup of tea and you're more into Junji Ito just for the amazing, phenomenal artwork, he has also released an art book called Twisted Visions that is an absolute ball to read. It is fantastic, just showcasing how detailed, how gory, and how downright scary Junji Ito's art can be. Okay, so now we've gone over a short roundup of Junji Ito's works. I want to really highlight what are some of my favorites. Now, I have not read every single piece of Junji Ito's work. I've tried to read as much as possible because I think his work is interesting and refreshing, but horror isn't my biggest cup of tea, so I haven't dedicated myself to reading his entire library. However, I'm going to highlight some of my favorites. Of course, the obvious choice is Uzumaki. For starters, it is one of the best Junji Ito manga. It's a one and done, but it also has a start where they're slightly shorter stories, and then the actual narrative delves in about a third of the way through. So it gives you a taste for Junji Ito's style early on before delving into a more narratively focused story. I have a whole review on my channel if you want to check that out, but yeah, Uzumaki is definitely a great place to start. However, I do not think Junji Ito's best works are his long form stories. That's just my opinion, but what I would recommend is going straight into one of the compilations. Now, Shiva is by far my favorite compilation because it includes stories like The Long Dream, Shiva, or Fashion Model, all of which are very scary stories that I really enjoyed reading. However, I also really enjoyed his retelling of Frankenstein. So if classic horror or classic literary horror is your cup of tea, then going for something like Frankenstein or No Longer Human is also a really, really good idea. So there you go. That's my beginner's guide to Junji Ito, including some of my favorites and what I would recommend for brand new starters. What do you guys think of Junji Ito, and what's your favorite story? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and go down to the Discord and Twitter links in the description and chuck me a follow or join the Discord channel down there. If you want to grab any of Junji Ito's works, you can purchase them from Forbidden Planet, Right Stuff, Book Depository, or Blackwell's, all of which have links down in the description. And at no extra cost to yourself, you're able to support the channel and help me carry on making this content. Without further ado, that's basically all I've got for you today. I hope you have a wonderful Halloween, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.